Writing with a word limit in mind, what happens when you love the characters but hate the plot, and what happens when the project is too big for you. This is Writing Advice Blitz! Hello, Redditly friends, and it's been a long while since I did a Writing Advice Blitz. For those of you unfamiliar with this other show that I have, allow me to explain to you the way it works. I get a lot of writing questions, and I do mean a lot of writing questions, and some of them I've already answered. That's why I have a Mega Master post, link to it in the description below, check it out. Other than that though, there are some questions that are really good and I make videos on them, and then there are questions that are really good, but I don't think that I could make a whole video on them because I have really brief answers to them. So over the past couple of weeks I've gotten a lot of questions and I don't have the time to do formal videos on all of them, so I thought, you know what, let's put them together and let's answer them all in the form of a Writing Advice Blitz, giving to you writing advice as fast as lightning. Now before we go anywhere else, allow me to give you the formal disclaimer and remind you that the following is merely just my advice, my opinion, and what worked for me. Do not take it as gospel, instead take it as a collection of tools. Take the ones you like, leave the ones you don't, modify them, change them, do whatever you need to make it work for you. So without any more messing around the bush, let's actually dive right in with today's first question. I think I am losing my connection to my characters. What do you recommend? Now, the way that this question was formatted, it talked a little bit about the idea that this person thought that their characters were becoming flat. And this is going to be a theme in today's questions, at least in a couple of them. And I've said this in the past and I'm going to say it again. A lot of writing problems are actually writer problems. Because I've found that us as the writers, we're kind of channeling the story, so a lot of the things that we consider to be problems of the writing are actually problems of writers, like this one. You know what I think you know what I recommend for this sort of situation? Focus on what excited you the most about the story and keep going. Simple as that. I actually made an entire video on how to regain the inspiration to finish that book. There should also be a link to it in the description below. It's one of my greatest hits. But other than that, what I mean by this is that there comes a point, usually after writing for a long while, when a writer starts questioning their craft, their characters, their world, and you start second-guessing yourself, and this is not good. And some of you may be thinking to yourselves, but Max, what if the story is not actually good? What if I'm wasting my time? You don't waste your time when you write because everything you write makes you better. And even if you... I'm sorry, I'm so unprofessional, I got a message in the middle of my speech. Where was I? That's right, nothing is wasted, and even if you realize when you finish the book that it needs work, you just revise it. That's how all books work. By the way, all books need work, by the way. There's absolutely no perfect first drafts. Like that great famous quote goes, all first drafts are shit. I know that when you're getting started with writing, and I know that when you are in the middle of a project, you start losing faith, and you start questioning yourself and second-guessing yourself, and of course, that is entirely natural, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with feeling like that. What I do recommend for you is to focus on what you liked, focus on what excited you about that story, focus on that and keep writing. Because, especially if you're right over the hump, right over the middle of the story, getting through all of the introduction stuff, the second act, you're pushing as fast as you can towards the climax of the story where everything else gets exciting. Focus on what you want, focus on what made you happy about that story, what excited you to write it from the beginning, and keep going. Again, the theme that I was talking about, this is not a writing problem, this is a writer problem, and that means that it's a problem within you. And that's a good thing, it's an empowering thing, because it means that you have the tools within yourself to overcome this problem and move forward. In this case, focus on what you like. In this case, it seems to me that it's the characters. Focus on the characters, don't second guess them, don't second guess your ability to write them, and just keep going. Keep going, finish the story, and then check things over. Because the good thing about writing is that you don't need to get it right the first time. You can always revise, and you can always make it better later. I hope this helps. Next question. What do you do when you realize you love the characters but hate the plot? Those of you familiar with one of my most popular posts, I will make a formal video on the Marcy rule, but let me tell you what it encompasses. I believe that plot is the byproduct of characters making choices. That is why my stories, at least, are character driven, and those are the stories that I enjoy the most. Stories in which the characters are the ones moving the story forward, and plot becomes ultimately a byproduct of their actions. So I think you can understand how I feel when I'm answering this question, because for me, it's a little bit silly, because for me, characters are at the center of the story, and the story is what happens to them, the choices they make, and the things they do. I understand that plotting and basically defining the events that need to happen in the story is a really big part of the traditional way of outlining a story. And for those of you who have seen my guide for playing a novel, you realize that's not how I do things. For me, my stories are driven by characters. As I've mentioned in the past, I don't see myself as the director or the scriptwriter of this movie. I am merely just the camera person. I am there to record what's happening between the actors or the characters and see what unfolds. Simple as that. I know that it's a really radical stance if you compare to what probably your English teacher is telling you. I say that with all the love in the world. That's not actually true. Now, without any more ranting aside, what do I think you should do when you love the characters but hate the plot? Focus on the characters. Get inside of your character's head if it's a first-person point of view story, or focus on what they want and their struggle if it's a third-person point of view story, and just keep writing. Just see what they want, see what they're willing to do for it, and just focus on them. You know, not all stories need to deal with the fall of an empire, and even then, the one thing that people forget is that people imagine that plotting is kind of like history, you know, events happening, but they forget that events don't happen in a vacuum. Those events happen because people made choices. And one of those things that always kind of gets me is that history forgets about the people who made those choices, the big characters of our time, you could say. So, if you want my personal tip, don't focus on the events. Don't focus on the big overarching things that you thought you wanted to get from the story. If you love the characters, focus on the characters. Focus on what they want, what they're seeking to get, what they're willing to pay for it, and who may be willing to stand in their way. As I've always said, follow your characters. They know where the story is going. Next question. I'm afraid this story is getting too big for me. What do you recommend? Fun fact, I used to play MMOs a long time ago. And there was something that I always found that I was kind of weird. How there were items that required a level. And the most ridiculous items, like, oh, you have to be level 29 to actually eat this fruit. And I'm like, excuse me? Well, like, what's so special about this glass of milk that requires me to be level 15? You know, you may be thinking to yourself, Max, are you recording the wrong video? I'm not. You don't have to be a certain level to write a story. And you don't have to work your way up smaller stories until you can write that big giant epic. Go and write that big giant epic, because let me tell you something right now. The first book you write is not going to be easy. The second book you write is still not going to be easy. Spoiler, every book you write is its own different monster, and they're not going to get any easier. What gets easier, if you ask me, is your willingness to focus on the habit of writing. Again, I don't think that you have to like work your way up through various formats until you arrive at the correct thing that you should be writing. There is no such thing as a project too big or too small for you, primarily because writing is about two things. Sharing a story and using your imagination. That's it. And both of those things, you have unlimited supply of. Again, two little things. Your ability to tell a story and your imagination. Those are the two you need, and that's it. And there's no like limits on these abilities that you have because they're endless. You can imagine whatever you want, and you can use your language and your ability to portray information to relay the story to other people. Now, some of you may be thinking, Max, but you have to wait until you have a more advanced language so you can portray the story. I don't believe that for one freaking second. There seems to be this sort of, and this is almost like a separate question on its own, the idea of like fancy language. I don't believe in fancy language at all. If a shorter word can be used instead of a longer one, use the short word. That's the way I like to do things. Using big, heavy words has never impressed me, and you can tell when somebody's doing it on purpose to sound intelligent. But, you know, there's a whole spiel that I can go on about this. You don't need to have fancy language. You don't need to go to college to write a story. Right? Telling stories is part of our human nature and our human culture. It is the way we share history and we share our personal thoughts and feelings through stories. Anyone can tell a story. Ultimately, it boils down to making the habit and never stopping. So, you, dear writerly friend, do not fear when you think this project is too big for you. Simply trust in your imagination, endless, boundless imagination, and trust in your ability to relay this information, because you have this ability. It is a natural part of your human being. Next question. My father says I should write with an audience in mind. What do you think? I think your father, maybe he has nice intentions. I mean, it would make sense for a father to be like, hey, write something for an audience, so you're guaranteed to please that audience and thus guarantee the sales of that audience. That makes sense. Now, do I agree with that? No. I think I've made like 100 writer positivities about this, but you should write for you. Now, some of you may be thinking, but Max, how do you guarantee you're gonna make an income from writing? Take it from the person who writes for a living. You cannot guarantee any of that. Seriously. Everyone I know in the business who has forcefully attempted to write for the core audience and has followed upon all of the things that certain blogs say and certain like checklists for what your book needs to have to be successful have not succeeded. Why? Because, well, there's a whole thing about culture and the way it moves, and the idea that if you're doing what is popular right now, you're actually one step behind and not ahead. Ultimately, here's the thing, okay? I am in publishing for a living. I make a living off of this. I make a living off of YouTube and of sharing information. And I can tell you this right now. If you don't enjoy this, if you're not having fun with this, and if ultimately this doesn't please you, it ain't gonna please anyone else. And even if you think it pleases some people, 10 years from now, you're not gonna be doing this. Because it's not gonna be pleasing you anymore. Because it never had. Take it from somebody who used to have a really, really, really crappy job that paid me a lot of money, but I hated every minute of it. And ultimately, you start realizing, wow, I'm wasting my time doing things that I don't like or things that don't make me happy. And ultimately, you sacrifice those other things to focus on the things that make you happy. So take it from me. The one resource that everyone has equally is time. So focus on writing the stories you want to tell. Yes, you can write for an audience in mind, sure. But I can tell you that the most effective way is to write the stories you want to tell and then allow those stories to create their own audience. Trust me, there is an audience for everything. And the best part of all is that if you write something that you enjoy, or in life, you do something that makes you happy and you put it out into the world, guess what? You already got what you needed from that. You already got the happiness and the enjoyment that you got from making that thing. Everything else is just bonus. So yeah, I'm sure that your father has the best of intentions, but from someone who is actually part of the business, you don't want to be one step behind everyone else. Create what you want, and if it makes an audience, boom, you're now ahead of everyone, and then everyone's going to start copying you. Oh, publishing. Next question. Do you have any tips on writing a specific word limit? I used to do a lot of short stories, and the couple of tips that I do have are basically this. Plan. Writing a short story is not the same as writing a book. My books are really fluid in the way that they go. Some of them are shorter than others. That's just the way the story works. Short stories, though, they kind of have to be on point. And back when I wrote a lot of short stories, I kind of would have this format in my mind because, every page is about 250 words. So I thought, okay, if I have 1,000 words, that's 4 pages. That's about 4 times 3, that's about 12 really big paragraphs. What can I say within these 12 really big paragraphs? And then you kind of go on from there. Really, there's kind of no magic to it. You kind of just learn to develop your own system for it. For me, though, as I mentioned, it was just a system of breaking down the amount of words that I have and figuring out what I could tell within this limit. And also, one of the good things about working on a word limit is that it teaches you how to be concise. Because I find myself being guilty sometimes of saying in 2 sentences what I could have said in 1. And, sometimes brevity is good, sometimes it's not. But, learning to be able to do that on its own is pretty good. And that's all I gotta say about that. I hope that helps. And today's final question is pretty darn silly, but I wanted to add it in here because otherwise I'm never gonna get to talk about this. I want to have pictures of my characters, but I can't art. I can't art either. Do you have any recommendations? Have you heard of Avatar Maker games? Just go into Google and type Avatar Maker or Face Maker or something. They're basically mini pseudo dress-up games. And as someone who can't art, I can tell you that I do use them every once in a while. I try not to use them always because I prefer to not have a dissonance between the image of my characters in my head and the page and the images that I create, because I do find that you cannot ever make them close enough. That's the unfortunate truth. But I do like to use them every once in a while. I am actually planning a project right now, super duper secret project. I can't tell you what it's about, but I wanted to get just some quick images of the characters in my head, so I used my favorite character avatar game. If you have at all dabbled in character avatar games, it's the Rinmaru Games one. I like it because I'm weeboo trash, and I realized over a couple of years that I picture all of my stories like animated. I don't actually picture like real actors. I actually picture animated people. That's the way my brain works. So I like this maker also because it makes tons of cute characters. Weeaboo Trash. That's the one I like the most. But if that doesn't appeal to you at all, just do a Google search for Avatar Maker Games or something like that. Oh man, just watch the follower drop count. The follower count drop. I have dyslexia, I'm sorry. The follower count drop as I just keep reminding you all that I'm Weeaboo Trash. But no, yeah, I mean, I wish that I could art. I can't art that well. I also do pixel art, but even then, it's not really as good. There's a couple of people who make me angry, and if Emmy Bunny is watching this right now, I hate you. I don't actually hate you. I love you because your art is beautiful, and she's doodled my characters before, and she's awesome, and she's a writer who can doodle, and that's ridiculous. That's too powerful. Too much power. Stop that. Stop that. Still as a side though, if you have any questions that you would like me to answer, leave it in the comments below. I may make writing Advice Blitz a thing again if I get enough questions. But there you go. As always, if you enjoyed this video, give it a like and subscribe if you want more. And if you would like even more writing advice, positivity, and prompts, head over to my writing advice blog over at maxkieran.tumblr.com. Thank you for watching. Thank you for spending a little bit of your day with me, and hope to be seeing you soon. Mwah. You should have imagined what it felt like 3 days ago when I was working on that secret project, and I was like, I can justify playing Avatar Maker games for like an hour as opposed to like working on emails, and I was like, yes, job.